What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel we are checking out the very legendary and iconic Randall Century 200. This amp was basically the bread and butter for the guitar tone for Pantera's album Vulgar Display of Power and Far Beyond Driven, and this amp, and more or less the sibling amp, the Randall Century 202, those amps were used for the entire live rig for those touring cycles. And these things never pop up. They're super rare. I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Ryan Day who let me borrow this thing. This thing's cool. I've never seen one in person until basically right now. And I'm kind of going full circle since I only saw these amps in like the Pantera home videos, the live footage, and maybe some of the studio footage and things like that. So I'm very honored and privileged to have this thing right here and show you guys what it's all about. Before we do that, let's hear how this thing sounds in a full demo mix. That was the Randall Century 200 in a full demo mix. I had my Washburn D3, Bill Lawrence XL 500 in the bridge, went into an MXR 6-band, out of the 6-band into this, and into my 2-notes captor into the cabinet section of Neural DSP Omega for that guitar sound. Alright, so now let's do a deep dive on the Randall Century 200. Now this is a solid state amp, and Randall is very well known for their solid state amplifier designs. They had a couple other tube and hybrid designs, but a lot of us know Randall for the solid state designs, basically from Dimebag's time with us, and as well as Jay Younger from White Zombie. At this time, all of Randall's amps were made in the United States, and the solid state preamp was based around an FET design, which is a field effect transistor, so it's a little bit different than a tube preamp circuit. The power amp was also based around constant current technology as well. The Randall amps were also very famous for having the XP technology, which essentially is channel blending. And I've demonstrated that on some other amps, checking out Dimebag's gear and everything like that, but essentially I can blend the clean and the lead channels together so I can hear basically both signals at one. It's kind of cool. I feel like a lot of bass players would really benefit from that, since I usually hear bass players messing with distortion and having a lot of the clean signal kind of run through. Not too much on guitar, but it is an option, and this has been pioneered from Randall since 1980. And the big goal of Randall amps was capturing the tube sound and the tube warmth, but in a solid state package. I really haven't shot out this Randall amp or other solid state Randall amps with tube amps. So if you want to see that happen, let me know down below, and we will shoot out the solid state versus tube amps and see which one sounds better. Now getting to the nitty gritty of this amp here, we have two channels, we have two different inputs, we have a high and a low input, and that is based on if you have hot pickups or weaker pickups, and the amp will kind of calibrate your signal to make up for the lacking in volume from your pickups. We have a clean and a lead channel, both with their own individual gain, volume, and treble, middle, bass controls. We have a global reverb and a global presence control on the amp. We have a 3-way power switch, which is really cool. Up and down both turn the amp on because this is also a ground hum eliminator. So if you have a grounding issue in the room that you're plugging this amp in, basically what you do is you either turn the amp on up or either down, and whichever way it sounds quiet and whichever way there's not a lot of extra ground noise coming through, that's where you leave it. This amp also has a few fun bells and whistles. On the clean channel gain knob, you can actually pull it up, and then this is actually going to be a bright switch for the amp, which will, engage maybe a little bit more high end of the amp. On the gain channel, we have a couple of other bells and whistles. We have the sustain boost switch. When you engage it, it'll drop the volume and it'll drop the mids, and it'll add a lot of gain to the signal, which will sound really awesome. And again, you might be able to use this and not really need an overdrive pedal to give you that really crushing metal tone. Very similar to the clean channel, on the distortion channel here, the gain knob here is also a push-pull knob, and when you pull it out, you engage a mid-boost function. And that is really cool if you are going to use it in conjunction with the sustain boost. Now going to the back of the amp has a proprietary foot switch connection, which I am not a fan of. I'm just going to get that out of the way with. If that foot switch connector breaks, or if you lose it, or if you get this amp used and you don't have it, you're not really going to have an easy time trying to integrate this into a live rig unless you're just using it for distortion. There's also an external jack for the reverb, which you can toggle in and out. We also have two speaker connectors. We also have a signal output, which is basically taking the preamp signal out of this and you can run it into the power amp section of another amp. You have an effects loop on the back of the amp as well. You also have a 120 volt AC power outlet on the back. So that would be really handy if you want to run a couple pedals on top of the amp here and you want to power it by actually using power from the amplifier. Let's say if you want to run like an MXR 6 band in front or in the back, like a pedal you want to have on all the time. What you do is you take your 9 volt adapter, you plug in the pedal, run the cables however you want to in the front or the back. That will save you from running long cables from the front of the amp all the way to the front of the stage and back and vice versa, however you're going to set up your amp and everything like that. So I do think that's really cool how Randall integrated onboard power for this amp to power other pedals. And last but not least, a very cool thing about the amp is that most amps have traditional fuses, and that is to protect the amp in case there's a surge or a power blip or something like that, so the internal components don't get fried. Now this amp has a circuit breaker very similar to the circuit breakers that are going to be in your breaker box in your house. So if there is a power blip, what you do is essentially reset the breaker on the back of this amp and your amp is good to go. And that's very cool and time efficient, especially if you don't have to run to the hardware store, try to find a matching fuse for the fuse that just fell apart. One final thing is that there is a Sentry 202, and I did a little bit of reading on that, and it seems like there's some people who are saying that it's just the repackaged version of this in a different layout. So I don't know, I feel like if it's a Sentry 2, it might sound a little bit different than the original, so maybe we'll try and get one of these on the channel. Maybe we'll shoot them out or do something like that. If you want to see that, let me know down below and I'll see if I can make it happen. Alright, so now let's pull the amp out of the mix, and I'm going to plug my guitar straight into it. I'm going to mess with all the controls, and this is just to give you an idea how the amp is going to sound on its own and as if you were going to be plugging into it for the very first time. So now I've dialed the amp in, I'm going to play some Pantera riffs, I'm going to have my guitar going straight into a MXR 6-band, you're going to see the settings on screen, you're going to see the amp settings on screen as well. The amp is then going into an IR capture of my Randall Jaguar cabinet, and then we're going to move on to guitar tones from the later years of Pantera and the Damage Plan era. We're going to use the same amp and pedal setup, different cabinet. We're going to use some Eminence Texas Heats and Legends in a blend out of my crank cabinet, and then we're going to use a different guitar and some different tunings just so you can hear how this sounds for some other kinds of context as well. Alright, so now let's go over my final thoughts and opinions on the Randall Century 200 amp. The first thing that I want to say is that obviously it is a solid state amp. It's very easy to live with. You don't have to worry about tubes or anything like that. Basically, it's just turn it on and go. Very similar to a lot of modern rigs that are based around solid state power amps and solid state modelers. So it's very cool to see solid state kind of coming back in a different way. This amp sounds wicked when you really dial it in. You crank the gain, use the sustain switch, turn the treble and the presence up a little bit, take the mids and the bass down a little bit. If you need to add a little bit more mids, you can roll them back in, or you can use the pull function on the gain knob to then actually add a mid boost as well. That all sounds wicked. There's a lot of wicked tones that you can get on this amp. Obviously, this is a metal focused demo and this amp is made to do metal, so that's kind of really what I wanted to showcase. This amp also sounds really great when you boost it with those MXR 6-band or any sort of equalizer. I'm pretty sure if you ran a parametric EQ in front of it as well, it would sound wicked, or throw it in the loop, it would also sound great. I also found that this amp was pretty picky with overdrive pedals, and some overdrive pedals just didn't really sound that great in front of this. I tried a couple different tube screamers and I was really left feeling like I need more from the pedal, and that the pedal really didn't have enough to sculpt the tone to where I liked it, to get the sound to honestly where I liked it at the end of the day. If you're trying to throw a tube screamer in front of this amp and thinking it's going to react like a 5150 with a tube screamer, it's not really going to do that. This amp needs a little bit more work, so I recommend that you use some sort of EQ pedal, whether it's a regular slider one or a parametric equalizer in the front or in the loop, to really sculpt the tone to really give you that awesome metal sound if you want to add a pedal to it. I will say the amp also has a pretty decent clean sound as well, especially if you are picking a little bit lighter. You turn up the channel volume a lot, you bring the gain way down, and you can get some pretty good clean tones as well. Again, it's not really going to be Fender clean, and these things aren't really known for their clean channels too much, and that's probably why in the 90s Grady and Dime actually went to a Mesa Mark IV series amp for the clean tones for the live rig. I also like that this amp has a circuit breaker on the back, just like you would find in your household breaker box. So if there is a power blip or something's going on with the amp, you flick the breaker or you flick the circuit on the back, and then it essentially resets the amp, and then you are going to be good to go. And lastly, I really like the fact that this amp has onboard AC power, so you can actually plug in some sort of 9-volt power supply and actually plug in some pedals and power it with that, with the onboard power on the amp, and run your pedals up here, which is really cool as well. Not a lot of amps have that, and again, this is a really cool thing that Randall was doing back in the day that not a lot of other companies were doing. Now, to the things that I dislike about the amp, the actual high end on the amp can get a little bit buzzy. Now, it might sound ironic because I say I liked the tone a lot. Again, I really had to EQ the amp, and I really had to throw a good amount of time to getting it to where it sounded really good for me. I also felt the amp was a little bit picky with overdrive pedals. As I said earlier, it really reacts better to a MXR 6-band. I also found that this amp is a little bit reactive and picky when it comes to just guitars and pickups in general. I tried the Deimbag with this, and I was getting some really weird chirping sounds with it versus using a Bill Lawrence XL. I also tried some other like Seymour Duncan Jupiters. I tried the Seymour Duncan Distortion, and they all sounded kind of okay, but for some reason the Bill Lawrence just sounded the best to me. Again, maybe it's because I'm a little bit biased to the tones that I'm wanting to get with this amp, if you catch my drift. Maybe I'll revisit it and spend a little bit more time with this and getting some different tones. If you want to see that, let me know down below. And the last thing that I dislike about the amp is the foot switch connector. It's this weird like 6-prong connector that is proprietary to the amp, so you can't really use like any sort of MIDI connection or any sort of 1/4 inch like stereo cable or something like that. You kind of have to find the actual foot switch for this amp. And if you don't have the foot switch, that's where it can be a little bit awkward. So I did have to actually turn the volume and the gain down on the clean channel to actually use the volume and the gain and the tone controls of the distortion circuit because of Randall's integrated XP system, which blends the channels. And that could also be a part that I maybe dislike about the amp, that the fact that I have to run it like that if I don't have a foot switch. And it is hard to come by those foot switches, by the way, so keep that in mind if you're trying to find one of these things used. So if you are wanting to use the distortion or the clean channel respectively, you have to turn down the volume and the gain on those particular channels that you are not using if you want to use the opposite channel. So that's why you saw me actually turning down the volume and the gain on the clean channel in order to use the red channel, because if I had the volume up and the gain up on that clean channel, you would hear a clean guitar signal blending through that. Now that's pretty cool if that's something you're looking for, but I feel like a lot of us are not really looking for that, especially if you are trying to chase Dimebag sound from Vulgar Display of Power and Far Beyond Driven. But otherwise, at the end of the day, I think this is a sick amp. It's really cool. It's a rare piece of gear. I'm really privileged to use it. I think if I found a good deal on one, maybe I would get one into the studio. I really had a great time using this despite some of the flaws that I just mentioned. They didn't really break down on me or anything like that, and it was really easy to record with. And yeah, I think I would like to get one of these at some point in the future, so we'll see if we can make that happen. But otherwise, this was super sweet to go down the rabbit hole and chase Dimebag's tone from Pantera's most iconic albums. And that's going to do it for today's video on the Randall Century 200 here. Let me know all thoughts and opinions down below, and if you want to see some more content with this, let me know as well. I love this amp. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I have tons more Pantera and Dimebag related videos on the channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I have tons more Dimebag, Pantera related videos on the channel that are doing the deep dive on chasing Dimebag's tone. And if you are a returning subscriber, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.